In the heart of modern Asia, behind glass walls and steel beams, there are places where the past was never buried, only sealed. You're listening to Ghosts of Asia, where forgotten rituals stir beneath polished floors, and ancient souls wait behind elevator doors that never open. Here, we tell the stories they don't speak of in boardrooms or blueprints, the kind of stories that echo long after 3:13 a.m. Tonight's tale is not fiction. It is memory repeating itself in silence. They called it an upgrade, a renovation. But when they broke down the wall behind the elevator shaft, they found something older than concrete and far more sacred than glass. They found a shrine, and what was left behind was not at peace. The building was called Saythorn Heights, a modern shell of ambition wrapped in 37 floors of concrete, glass, and old regrets. It had once been a proud headquarters for a government-backed tech firm in Bangkok, but decades of silence and shifting ownership had worn it down into a relic, one that still loomed above the skyline like a question nobody wanted to answer. Renovations began in late October, timed to coincide with a seasonal lull in building occupancy. New investors wanted to bring life back into the tower. New lighting, new elevators, a clean start. It was all going smoothly until the elevator started stalling. It always happened at 3:13 a.m. The maintenance logs showed nothing irregular. The engineers ran full diagnostics, replaced sensors, and even rewired the central elevator control panel. And yet, the elevator kept stopping between the 12th floor and what the panel simply skipped. No 13th floor, not in the blueprint, not in the buttons, not even in the emergency protocols. And still, the elevator would halt in that invisible space. The hum would deepen, the lights would flicker cold, and for exactly 60 seconds, time would slow inside the shaft, like breath held too long. Technician Prayut, a 39-year-old father of two who had worked vertical systems for over a decade, was the first to notice something he couldn't explain. One morning after a night shift, he told the foreman in a low, nervous voice, "I heard chanting." They laughed at him, said it was stress, late hours. He shrugged it off too, but he stopped taking the elevator after that. 2 nights later, a young intern named Jacentra took the elevator down after finishing paperwork on the 22nd floor. At 3:13 a.m., the security feed froze for exactly 1 minute. When the footage resumed, the elevator was at the lobby. Jacentra was gone. Not a single frame showed her leaving. They reviewed the footage 20 times. Cameras in the lobby showed the doors open and nothing. No footsteps, no shadow, just a sudden hush, like the building itself exhaled. When the police came, they treated it as a runaway case. Maybe she used the fire escape. Maybe she left early and no one noticed. But the building's digital badge system showed her card never left the elevator. The maintenance crew grew uneasy. They began tracking a pattern. Every third night, the elevator would stall, always at 3:13 a.m., always between the 12th and a floor that technically didn't exist. Then someone remembered something strange from the early construction logs. The original design plans had 38 floors, but the building had 37. One was erased before construction even finished. The current renovation crew was from Thunacon Engineering, hired to gut and rework all internal systems, starting with electrical and elevator infrastructure. One of their subcontractors, a Burmese worker named Ko Lin, reported finding strange inconsistencies in the walls around the elevator shaft. There were sealed bricks where there should have been open wiring space. He was told to ignore it, patch it over, stay on schedule. But Colin didn't ignore it. On his own, he began tapping the walls at night, listening for hollowness. And one evening, while alone in the service corridor behind the elevator shaft, he heard something more than hollow. He heard a prayer. Not a whisper, not a chant from the streets outside, but a deep, droning monastic hum, like 100 voices echoing through a stone hall. It vibrated the steel bolts in the wall. It numbed his fingertips. When he told the foreman, the man scolded him for wasting time. He shouted, "There's no shrine here. This is an office building, not a temple." But Colin, pale and shaking, pointed behind the panel. "Then why do I smell incense?" The air in the elevator shaft was changing. Cold at times, almost warm at others. Some workers reported drifting smells of sandalwood. Others swore they saw ash flakes near the vent ducts. And every time they cleaned, the dust came back. Not gray, not white, but the deep orange of burnt lotus petals. The official word was to move forward. Demolition was scheduled to begin on the central shaft wall by week's end. Reinforced concrete would be replaced with tempered glass panels. Aesthetic modernization. But the architect overseeing the renovation, Chaiwat, received an anonymous letter slipped under his office door that evening. It had no return address. It contained no greeting, just 5 handwritten words. "Do not break the wall." That same night, a lift operator named Sum Chai went missing during a shaft inspection. His radio was found beside the elevator motor. His gloves were still folded near the ladder. The elevator logs showed he entered the shaft at 2:55 a.m. At 3:13 a.m., the elevator moved on its own. Nobody pressed a button. The humming returned. This time, it did not stop for an hour. And when it finally went silent, a new scent drifted down the shaft, burning wax and something older, something that made the night guard weep without understanding why. The next day, no one wanted to inspect the shaft. Even the bravest among them refused to be near the elevator at night. One electrician said the walls felt warm like skin and refused to touch them. Still, the schedule had to continue. The wall would be demolished. As the morning sun climbed over the city, Chaiwat stood before the sealed concrete with a quiet tremor in his chest. He placed his hand on the cold stone and listened. And in that moment, beneath the hum of wires, beyond the murmur of drills, he swore he heard a bell. A single, distant monk's bell, echoing from behind the wall. Not ringing, just waiting. The demolition team arrived early. They wore helmets and reflective vests, walked with drills slung across their shoulders, and joked about ghosts and overtime. But their voices quieted the closer they came to the elevator shaft. There was something about the stillness there, how even the fluorescent lights above seemed dimmer. The wall stood as if it didn't belong. It wasn't part of the blueprint. Chaiwat, the architect, double-checked the structural records. According to every file on record, the shaft behind that wall should have extended straight through the floor. No reinforcement, no cinder block, no reason for a solid mass to be there. And yet, there it was. A freestanding wall, sealed tight behind the central elevator shaft, spanning from floor to ceiling like a tombstone. It was newer than the rest of the structure, at least 2 decades younger based on the cement style, but no one could find the renovation permit. No paperwork, no notes, just silence where there should have been signatures. That morning, the foreman assigned 2 demolition workers, Niran and Bunsak, to begin chipping away at the strange partition. They rolled in a pneumatic drill and began to crack through the outer layer. The moment the first slab fell, the elevator stalled. Not a malfunction, Not a power cut, just a sudden, unnatural halt, as if the entire lift system held its breath. Lights flickered across the building. A low rumble stirred beneath the floor. And then, from within the wall, the exposed part they had just cracked open, a gust of warm air exhaled into the room. It smelled of sandalwood, aged paper, and something metallic. "It's a shrine," Boonsak muttered, almost reverently, brushing away the dust with his glove. The workers paused, not out of fear, but out of instinct, the kind of quiet that happens when someone walks into a place meant for prayer. Inside, just beyond the first broken panel, lay the unmistakable silhouette of a Buddhist altar. It was built into the shaft's hollow, hidden from all sides by concrete and steel. A red cloth, faded by age, but untouched by dust, lay draped across a stone platform. Upon it rested 3 bronze bowls filled with hardened wax and lotus seeds. Behind them, mounted onto the back wall, was a statue of the Bodhisattva. Not the golden, radiant kind seen in temples. This one was carved of charred black wood, eyes closed, palms pressed together, its surface marked with strange white ink inscriptions that had begun to flake. No one moved. Even the machine seemed to fall silent. Niran whispered, more to himself than to anyone else, This shouldn't be here." It wasn't just the presence of the shrine. It was its condition, untouched by time, completely preserved in an airtight chamber, as if the shrine had never meant to be seen again, as if it had been sealed for a reason. The workers backed away. The foreman made some calls. The room was cleared, and a team of executives arrived later that afternoon. One of them, a sleek-suited manager named Mr. Komsan, chuckled nervously as he stepped inside. "What's the fuss? A hidden temple? Could be good PR." He touched the wooden statue. The temperature dropped 5 degrees. A light bulb shattered above his head. Everyone left shortly after. The official report labeled the space as an unauthorized pre-construction cavity. The executives considered having it removed, citing potential safety concerns. But Chaiwat pushed back. Something gnawed at him, a weight in the gut he couldn't ignore. He returned to the shaft alone that evening, long after the others had left. He brought a flashlight, a digital camera, and his grandfather's prayer beads. The moment he crossed the threshold, his ears began to ring. Not sharply, not painfully, but like a low vibration behind the eyes, as though the air itself carried memory. He took photographs, 5 in total, but when he reviewed them, each frame was black, save for one. The 4th photo showed the shrine, dimly lit, and standing just behind the altar, barely visible through the grain and shadow, was the figure of a monk. Head bowed, hands folded, face veiled in blur. Chaiwat stared at the photo until his phone battery died. He didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Ko Lin was gone. He had left his tools neatly aligned beside the shaft. His time card was stamped out. His shoes sat by the base of the wall, a custom from home, where one removed footwear before stepping near a sacred altar. He was never seen again. Security footage showed him walking toward the shaft at 3:13 a.m. The camera cut to static at 3:13. When the feed returned, the wall was unchanged, but the bowls on the altar had been rearranged. The largest one now held 3 fresh lotus petals. No one had been inside. No one had access, and yet the shrine had been visited. Later that week, Chaiwat received a brown envelope slipped under his office door. No return address, no postmark. Inside were 2 items. The first was a photograph of the shaft dated 1974, long before the current company occupied the building. The shrine was visible, glowing in candlelight. 4 monks sat in front of it, eyes closed. The second was a single sheet of parchment paper, old and brittle. It bore a sentence written in red ink: "Some prayers were never meant to end." For the next 2 days, the renovation team refused to touch the sealed wall. No one said it out loud, but they all felt it. The kind of tension that grows from silence rather than noise. The shaft seemed to breathe now. The elevator doors trembled faintly each time they opened, as if air pressure shifted behind them. And that smell, the faint, drifting perfume of sandalwood and burnt lotus, lingered no matter how many times they cleaned. The foreman insisted it was mold from the insulation, but everyone else knew what they smelled: incense. The first opening. By Friday, the investors were getting impatient. They wanted to see progress. They wanted to see the hidden shrine that had everyone whispering. So, against Chaiwat's protests, the demolition was ordered to continue. At 9:15 that morning, a young worker named Kiet struck the wall again. His chisel hit something hollow. The sound echoed unnaturally long, like a bell tolling under concrete. The wall cracked from ceiling to floor. A thin beam of light, soft and golden, spilled through the gap. Inside was a chamber no bigger than a storage closet, lined with faded red silk and aged wood. The Buddhist shrine within was untouched. Dust floated like slow rain, but none of it settled on the altar. It looked impossibly clean, like someone had just prayed there moments ago. 3 bronze bowls sat on a marble platform, arranged with mathematical precision. In the center stood a statue of a seated monk, carved from blackened wood. Its eyes were closed, its palms pressed together in an eternal prayer. And carved into the base were 5 words in Pali script: "To seal, so they may rest." The note. Pinned beneath one of the bowls was a folded piece of parchment, yellowed, brittle, but perfectly preserved. Chaiwat picked it up with trembling fingers. It read, "Do not awaken them. If the bell rings, leave." The workers exchanged uneasy glances. The room grew colder. The air conditioning was off, yet their breath misted in front of them. Still, the foreman, half out of pride, half out of fear of losing his contract, ordered the space to be cleared and documented. They removed the altar. They wrapped the statue in white cloth. They took photos, measured every corner, and labeled each artifact for transfer. By sunset, the chamber was empty, and the smell of incense was gone. The first death. That night, Kiet, the worker who broke the wall, didn't go home. He stayed behind to finish rewiring the control system, or at least that's what he told the guards. At 2:58 a.m., the security camera saw him enter the elevator. He pressed the button for the 12th floor. The elevator moved normally until it stopped at 3:13. The feed glitched. The doors opened halfway. A flicker of orange light appeared behind him, as if a candle had been lit inside the elevator. Then, static. When the footage resumed, the elevator was empty, but a small offering bowl sat neatly in the corner. Inside it were 3 lotus petals and a single drop of blood. Kiet's body was found the next morning at the bottom of the maintenance shaft. The coroner said it was a fall, but there was no sign of struggle, no broken bones, just the expression on his face, peaceful, eyes open, hands clasped in prayer. Echoes in the shaft. After that, the building changed. The walls began to hum at night. Tools went missing. Windows fogged from the inside even when the air was dry. And the elevator, that same elevator, refused to work after dark. No matter how many times it was reset, it would stop precisely between the 12th and 14th floors at 3:13 a.m. No one rode it anymore. The company brought in a monk from a nearby temple, a thin, quiet man with calm eyes and a prayer rope worn to threads. He bowed before the exposed wall, pressed his palms together, and whispered something no one could hear. When he finished, he turned to Chaiwat and said softly, "This place is not haunted by anger. It is haunted by unfinished prayer." He advised them to restore the shrine exactly as it had been: the bowls, the cloth, the wooden statue, everything. But the executives refused. They said the space would become part of the new lobby design. They would remove the superstitious clutter and convert it into a decorative display, a cultural token, nothing more. The monk's face darkened. He bowed one last time, leaving behind his wooden mala beads at the edge of the elevator shaft. Then he murmured, "You have broken a vow you did not make." The awakening. That night, the janitor heard bells, not digital alarms or fire sensors, but ritual bells, delicate and rhythmic, coming from somewhere deep within the shaft. He followed the sound until he reached the sealed chamber. The wall, the one they had torn down and patched over, was bleeding through the plaster. Not with blood, but with dark resin, oozing slowly like tears from the concrete. And there, standing before the wall, was Kiet, his uniform still stained with dust, his back turned. He was praying. The janitor froze. He called out once, twice, no response. When he reached forward to touch the man's shoulder, his fingers met nothing, only the air and the scent of incense. The chanting grew louder. The bells began to shake. And from behind the sealed wall, a knock echoed, soft, deliberate, rhythmic, 3 times, as if something on the other side was politely asking to come out. By dawn, the building's power had flickered off 3 separate times. The elevator control room recorded an unexplainable surge at exactly 3:13 a.m. And at that very moment, the wooden statue, wrapped in white cloth and stored in a locked crate on the 20th floor, turned its head. No one saw it happen, but every security camera facing the hallway outside flickered with static. And when the feed resumed, the elevator doors opened themselves, releasing a faint breath of warm, perfumed air. The renovation was halted for 48 hours. Officially, it was for structural safety review. Unofficially, no one wanted to step inside the elevator again. By the 4th day, the higher-ups ordered the crew back to work. The schedule was slipping, the budget bleeding. To keep morale up, they promised bonuses and night shift rotations with double pay. Only a few accepted. Among them was Somchai, a veteran lift technician who didn't believe in ghosts, or said he didn't. He'd worked on elevators for 20 years. He'd seen systems fail, pulleys snap, brakes lock. He knew what could go wrong, and he swore this was not it. "A machine only moves when you tell it to," he muttered, tracing a line of chalk on the shaft wall. "This one moves when it wants to." The last inspection. It was just past midnight when Somchai descended into the elevator pit to inspect the gears. His flashlight beam cut through layers of dust and silence. Below him, the steel pulleys gleamed faintly in the low light, motionless, perfect. He adjusted the radio on his belt and spoke into it. "Level 12 shaft inspection, all clear." The foreman responded with static, then a voice, faint, hollow, and drawn out. "Clear, Clear, clear. It wasn't the foreman's voice. Somchai froze. He turned toward the wall. The air seemed to vibrate, a low humming almost imperceptible. It came from the concrete itself. He placed his hand on the wall. It was warm. And when he pulled it away, a faint smear of soot darkened his fingertips. Up above, the elevator doors opened on their own. No one was inside, but the sensor triggered a soft chime, the kind that plays when someone steps in. The cables twitched, and then, without command, the elevator began to descend. The descent. Somchai stared upward, flashlight beam trembling. The elevator car lowered slowly, silently, stopping halfway down. There was at least 6 meters between him and the car's underframe. Then it began again, a soft hum, almost like chanting. He looked up. Someone was standing inside the car, a figure in saffron robes, head bowed, palms together. The figure began to rise slowly, not the elevator, but the person, floating straight upward through the ceiling. Somchai stumbled back, dropping his flashlight. The beam spun across the floor, catching something small and glimmering near the base of the shaft, a bronze offering bowl. It hadn't been there before. Inside, fresh rice, still warm. He radioed the foreman again. No response. Static. Then breathing. Soft. Measured, rhythmic. It wasn't his. The fall. At 3:13 a.m., the cameras on the service floor flickered. The elevator stopped. The system log registered movement in the shaft, downward acceleration, but no open car. For the next 60 seconds, the sensors recorded something falling, something heavy. But when the safety team arrived, the shaft was empty. The cables were intact. The elevator had never left the 12th floor. No body, no impact, no blood. Only Somchai's radio, hanging from a steel bolt halfway up the wall. Its strap was wrapped neatly around the handle, like someone had placed it there. The replayed footage. Security reviewed the footage frame by frame. The elevator doors opened on the 12th floor. The hallway was empty. The doors stayed open for exactly 60 seconds. Then something flickered across the camera. A blur. A human silhouette kneeling. It appeared for less than a second, and in that second, every microphone in the building recorded the same sound, a low chant, resonant and ancient. The syllables couldn't be translated, but the tone was unmistakably funeral. Afterward, the elevator closed by itself and resumed service as though nothing had happened. At 3:14, all systems returned to normal. The only anomaly left behind was the elevator's weight sensor, which displayed a static reading of 108 kilograms, the exact symbolic number of prayer beads in a Buddhist mala. The reappearance. 2 days later, a janitor cleaning the basement reported seeing Somchai. He said he was crouched beside the backup generator, whispering prayers under his breath. When the janitor called out, Somchai looked up, but his eyes were closed. He stood, pressed his palms together, and walked toward the elevator door. The janitor followed, shouting his name. Somchai entered the lift. The doors slid shut, and the janitor realized the elevator was offline. There was no power to that shaft. When they opened the doors, the car was empty, but a faint fingerprint in soot
marked the inside wall. A single palm print pressed against the mirror, and written in small, almost childlike script beneath it, scrawled with something black and sticky, were the words, "He did not fall." The silence. That night, the engineers left early. Even Chaiwat, once determined to stay until dawn, sat in his car for an hour before daring to start the engine. He stared up at the tower. Every window was dark, except one, the 12th floor. A single office light glowed faintly yellow. Inside, a shadow moved, slow and deliberate, placing something small on the floor before bowing deeply. From where Chaiwat sat, it looked like the shape of a monk lighting a candle. And though the glass muffled all sound, he was certain he heard it. A low chant, like a temple bell, ringing once, and once more, and then not again. By the end of the week, no one in the building laughed anymore. The jokes had stopped. The whispers had turned into silence. Even the foreman, who once barked orders and scoffed at the word ghost, began arriving later and leaving earlier, always taking the stairs. Because something had changed. It wasn't just the elevator anymore. It was the walls. They were listening. A forgotten floor. Chaiwat, the architect, returned to his office to review the original blueprints again. He dug into the archives. The building had been redesigned multiple times since the 70s, but the earliest schematics were still intact, scanned into digital files, but never fully updated. He traced the central shaft. In the 1971 blueprints, there was a clear structure labeled Floor 13, reserved. But the record stopped there. No details, no annotations, just a single note scribbled in the margin. Converted during final construction, no public access. And then in red ink, faded, smudged. Monks relocated. Concrete seal approved. Relocated? To where? Chaiwat stared at that word for a long time. An unofficial testimony. Out of desperation, he reached out to the oldest surviving engineer who had worked on the site in its earliest days, a retired supervisor named Mr. Amnat, now in his 80s and living alone in Chiang Mai. At first, the old man refused to talk, but when Chaiwat mentioned the elevator, the shrine, and 3:13 a.m., he fell quiet. Then, after a long breath, he said, "We never relocated them. We sealed them inside." The story beneath the foundation. Back in 1972, before the building was ever meant to be corporate property, the land had been occupied by a cloister of forest monks. They had built a small wooden prayer hall on the land, one used only at night, only during certain months for ritual fasting and chanting. When the government sold the land, a deal was struck. The monks would leave quietly, but 7 of them refused. Not out of protest, but because they believed they were guarding something. They said the earth beneath the prayer hall had been consecrated, and the final chant must be completed by those who had begun it. The city ignored them. The developers poured concrete. But by the time they reached the 13th floor, strange things had begun to happen. Workers fell sick, cranes jammed, and always the sound of chanting after midnight. So someone made a decision. They left the floor hollow, they constructed around it, and they built a wall behind the elevator shaft, encasing the prayer hall, altar, and monks inside. Alive. No official record, no permits, just a silent burial in concrete and stone. "They volunteered," Amnat said quietly, his voice nearly cracking. They believed their chant would keep something sealed and that breaking it would let it out. Chaiwat sat in stunned silence. The monks weren't ghosts. They were still chanting. The sound in the walls. Back at the site, the workers began to complain of headaches, not the kind caused by dust or poor ventilation, but a constant vibration in their ears, a low murmur, always just beneath the surface, like something being repeated over and over behind the concrete. One engineer swore he could hear it clearer when he pressed his cheek to the wall. He didn't speak for the rest of the day after that. Another worker, assigned to repaint the shaft wall, discovered an uneven patch of cement. When he scraped it with a trowel, the surface cracked open, revealing a strip of aged wood soaked black with time and resin. Carved into it, barely legible in ancient Pali, was, "To seal is mercy, to disturb is hunger." He ran. That same night, at 3:13 a.m., the fire alarm on the 12th floor triggered on its own. There was no fire, only smoke. But not industrial smoke. It smelled of burnt robes. The whispering concrete recorded another anomaly. One of the concrete columns had begun to sweat, not water, but black resin trickling slowly down its side. A lab test revealed organic compounds, traces of ash, and, impossibly, blood proteins. They thought it was contamination, but every time they wiped it away, the resin returned. Only one man dared to stay late that week, a young Cambodian electrician named Rith. He was quiet, devout, and carried a string of white blessing threads wrapped around his wrist. He had grown up near forest temples. He recognized the chanting, and one night at 3:13 a.m., he whispered back. The elevator stopped. The lights dimmed, and slowly the concrete wall began to vibrate. Not violently, but gently, like a heartbeat. Rith stepped forward, placed both palms flat against the cold surface, and bowed his head. For a moment, the entire building held its breath, and from somewhere deep inside the wall, 100 voices whispered in unison, "We are still here." The brief peace. After that night, no one saw Rith again. His belongings remained untouched. His safety gear hung neatly in the locker, and on the wall beside the elevator shaft, someone had tied a fresh white thread, the kind used in Thai funeral rites. Security removed it the next morning. That night, 3 elevators malfunctioned. One descended with no power. Another stalled with passengers inside, who claimed they saw monks just outside the glass door, even though the floor was solid concrete. The third elevator opened to an empty 13th floor that did not exist in the building system. The passengers swore they saw candles, and the floor was warm. It started with rice. A small ceramic bowl of freshly steamed white rice appeared on the floor outside the elevator on the 12th floor. Still warm, still fragrant, placed neatly on a folded banana leaf. No one saw who left it. No one claimed it. The janitor found it at 3:30 a.m., just minutes after the elevator had stalled again. He picked it up with gloved hands and carried it downstairs to the security desk. By morning, the rice had turned black. Day 1. Coins on the floor. The next night, it was coins. Ancient, oxidized temple tokens, the kind used in traditional offerings. They were found in a straight line leading from the stairwell to the elevator doors. Each one stamped with the image of a seated monk, eyes closed, hands folded. The guards reviewed security footage. No one was seen placing them. But at 3:13 a.m., The hallway camera flickered, and for a split second, the elevator doors stood open, revealing a faint orange glow inside, like candlelight. By the time they reached the floor, the doors had closed. The coins were waiting. Day 2. The Ash Blossom. On the third night, a lotus flower was found on the lobby desk. It had been burned, edges crisped, petals darkened, but somehow still held its shape. Wrapped around the stem was a small scroll, sealed with wax. Chaiwat was called to open it. The parchment inside read, "You took what fed them. We return it now." He didn't sleep that night. No one did. The guard who stepped on rice. On the fourth night marked the first violent death. A new security guard, young, impatient, unaware, found a small offering outside the elevator at 3:13 a.m. Rice, coins, a slice of banana. He laughed, called it spirit food, and kicked it aside with his boot. The lights above him exploded. The elevator doors opened behind him without a chime. He turned. A blast of hot air hit his face. Smoke poured out, not from fire, but from burnt cloth and incense. He screamed. When they found him later, he was paralyzed, still breathing, still conscious, but unable to speak. His eyes remained wide open, locked on something no one else could see. And on the floor beside him lay a single word, scrawled in ash: feed. The return of the altar. By the fifth night, offerings began appearing across the entire 12th floor. Neatly arranged plates, fresh candles burning without a flame, photographs, black and white images of monks kneeling in prayer. None of these items existed in inventory. No one had brought them in, and yet, there they were. An operations supervisor tried to sweep them away. The broom snapped in her hands. She stumbled back, and for a split second, the ceiling lights flickered, revealing just above her head a faint silhouette in saffron robes, suspended upside down. When the light returned to normal, the shadow was gone, but the offerings had multiplied. The woman who sang in her sleep. An intern named Noina, who had never prayed in her life, began humming softly during meetings. At first, no one noticed, just a tune, low, rhythmic, repeating. Until one afternoon, a Thai Burmese electrician froze in the hallway and turned to her with wide eyes. "Where did you learn that?" he asked. "I don't know," she said. "I've been dreaming of someone beneath the floor. He sings to me." That night, Noina never went home. The elevator was logged to the 12th floor at 3:11 a.m. Security saw her press the call button. They saw the doors open. She smiled. She stepped in. The doors closed. The car never moved. It simply disappeared from the system. Her ID badge was later found inside the offering bowl that appeared the next morning, still warm. The chant that filled the room. On the seventh night, the chanting returned, not just as a whisper, but loud, full, ancient. It rolled through the walls like thunder pressed into silence, 100 voices in unison. Words no one understood, but every soul in the building felt. It echoed through air vents, rattled windows, knocked over pens, and loosened bolts. When it stopped, nothing moved for a full minute. The building felt like a temple, not abandoned, but occupied, as if the walls had remembered something they had once been. The shrine reappeared. At dawn, Chaiwat returned to the sealed chamber. He opened the door slowly. Inside, the altar had returned, exactly as it had been. The red cloth, the 3 bronze bowls, the statue of the Bodhisattva with eyes closed. But there was something new now. At its base sat 7 white strings, the kind tied around wrists in rituals of mourning, one for each night, one for each offering. And as Chaiwat knelt, trembling to pick them up, the elevator in the distance began to hum, not a mechanical whir, but a chant, humming upward from somewhere deep inside the shaft.
Her name was Noinina, 19, new to the city, quiet, polite, always early. She came from a small village where monks still walked barefoot at dawn and temple bells were louder than sirens. She believed in spirits, but like most who moved to Bangkok, she had learned to ignore them, until the dreams began. The first dream. It started the night after the shrine reappeared. She dreamt of being inside the elevator, alone, descending. There were no buttons, no lights, only the soft glow of candles lining the walls and a distant chant rising from below. When she looked down, her feet were not touching the floor. She was floating, palms folded, dressed in white. And below her, far, far below, a man stood barefoot in a chamber of stone. A monk, old, his head bowed, hands raised. He was chanting, and he was singing to her. The morning after. Noinina awoke with her pillow wet from tears. Her roommate found her standing at the window, humming softly, a tune neither of them recognized. When asked about it, Noinina shrugged. "I don't know," she said, "but I think he's waiting for me." The humming began. She began humming the melody at work, in the hallway, in the break room, always softly, almost unconsciously. Others noticed. Some said it was beautiful. Some said it made them nauseous. One woman fainted in the elevator when she heard Noinina's voice behind her, though Noinina wasn't there. Security reviewed footage. The humming could be heard clearly, as if someone were standing right beside the microphone, but visually, the hallway was empty, except for a shadow on the wall, flickering like candlelight. The monks returned to her dreams. Each night the dreams returned, each time clearer. Noinina walked barefoot now, in a white dress. She no longer feared the descent. The elevator took her to a floor that didn't exist, a temple buried in stone. She knelt before the same monk, now joined by 6 others. Each one held their palms out to her. Each one wore threads around their wrists. "You are the voice," one of them whispered. "Let them hear us again." The unmarked tape. One morning, a maintenance worker found an old VHS cassette in the shaft monitoring room. It was unlabeled, dusty, not cataloged. He played it out of curiosity. The footage showed the construction site from 1973. Bare concrete, no walls, no glass. But clearly visible was a group of monks sitting cross-legged in a circle where the elevator shaft would be. And in the center, a girl stood. Not from 1973, not from any era on the tape. Noinina. Same face, same hair, same white dress. She was humming. The audio hissed and cracked, and then cut out. The worker unplugged the tape. He never returned to work. The disappearance. On the 7th night, Noinina stayed late. She told no one, left no note. She simply waited in the hallway near the elevator, humming to herself as the clock approached 3:13 a.m.
The elevator arrived. The doors opened. The car was empty, filled with the scent of lotus and ash. She stepped in. The doors closed. She was never seen again. The shaft that sang. The next day, security discovered her shoes placed neatly beside the shaft's maintenance door, and inside the elevator, silence, except when the power flickered. Then, only then, a voice could be heard, soft, melodic, repeating the same 4 notes. A woman's voice. No background noise, no machinery, only breath and rhythm, as if someone were singing from inside the walls. The new offering. That night, the shrine bore a new gift, a string of white thread, 7 knots, tied by a woman's hand, and beneath it, a scrap of paper torn from a notebook. It read, "He is not alone now." A building that listened. After her disappearance, strange things began to move within Satorn Heights. Doors opened slightly on their own, not wide, just enough to be noticed. Cameras picked up whispers with no speaker. People swore they felt someone walking behind them, robes brushing against fabric, the subtle breath of incense warming the air. And every time someone pressed the elevator button on the 12th floor, the panel would blink, the lights would dim, and from somewhere deep in the shaft, a girl's voice would hum. Always the same song, always the same time. A melody not meant for ears, but for souls that had forgotten to rest.
The first complaint came from the 20th floor. A woman working late noticed the smell, faint but unmistakable. Smoke. Not fire, not burning plastic or shorted wires, but incense smoke. Old, familiar, sacred. She called maintenance. They found nothing. The second complaint. By morning, 4 more offices had logged similar reports. The smell drifted through the ventilation system, curling into vents and light fixtures. One IT technician said it reminded him of his grandfather's funeral. Another swore she saw ash drifting from the ceiling light, just for a second, and then it was gone. An engineer opened one of the duct grills. Inside was nothing but darkness. No soot, no damage, no reason. But when he held his flashlight into the shaft, the beam bent slightly, as if the air inside was thickening. The discoveries begin. Later that week, during a routine HVAC inspection on the 17th floor, 2 contractors uncovered a small urn tucked deep inside a duct. Bronze, unmarked, still warm. It wasn't listed in any building records. It had no inventory tag, no dust. Inside, ashes. But not just wood or incense. This ash had fragments of bone. Tiny, charred, human. The men backed away slowly, one whispering a prayer under his breath. They sealed the duct, filed a report, said nothing else. But the next night, one of them, Tirapong, began speaking in Pali during sleep. His wife recorded it. May the door remain closed. May those who wait keep silence. May the chant remain unbroken. He had never studied the language, and when she played the recording back for him, he wept and couldn't explain why. Ash from the ceiling. More ash appeared in the building. It drifted lightly through the upper floors, fine black powder, always after midnight, always without a source. Employees arriving early in the morning would find their desks dusted, faint, delicate trails of gray tracing across keyboards, coffee cups, even across framed family photos.
No fire alarms ever triggered, no heat signatures registered, and yet ash kept falling. The man who opened the vent. A contractor named Buren didn't believe the rumors. He mocked the shrine, scoffed at the stories. He claimed it was all psychological, a side effect of too much work, too little air circulation. So he opened a duct himself. On the 14th floor, in an empty server room, he unscrewed the vent panel, aimed his flashlight, and crawled inside. He was heard screaming 20 seconds later. By the time they pulled him out, he had bitten through his own tongue. He couldn't speak, couldn't explain, but across his arms, someone had scratched 6 lines, deep, parallel marks that didn't draw blood, only burned. And in the palm of his hand was clenched a fistful of wet ash. The HVAC schematic. Chaiwat began to suspect something deeper. He requested the original HVAC schematics from storage. When overlaid with the 1971 architectural plans, something emerged. The ducts, originally designed to curve around the elevator shaft, had been rerouted. They now passed directly over the 13th floor, the floor that no longer existed, the floor that had been sealed. And where the duct made its deepest turn near the central shaft was a handwritten note in red pencil. Ash must be allowed to breathe. A security guard doing rounds at 2:30 a.m. heard breathing from a ventilation grill. He paused, listened. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't wind. It was breath, slow, rhythmic, human. He leaned closer, and then he heard a woman's voice whisper through the grill. "They're almost done chanting." He collapsed where he stood. When found, he had burns on both ears, not severe, but bright red, shaped like 2 fingers pressed against his skull. The fire that wasn't. At 3:13 a.m. the next night, the building's fire suppression system triggered on the 16th floor. Sprinklers engaged, sirens wailed, everyone evacuated. But when emergency crews arrived, there was no fire, no heat, no smoke. And yet the sprinklers had gone off, everywhere, except the hallway outside the elevator. There on the floor was a circle of ash, perfectly formed. Inside it, a single wooden bead, scorched at the edges. A monk's prayer bead, still warm. The return of the chant. That night, the ventilation system began to chant. Not the ducts, not the fans, but the air itself. The sound emerged softly from every grill, every vent, every exhaust. 100 voices, in harmony, chanting not in rage, not in warning, but in ritual, as if the building had become a mouth, repeating sacred words. And those words were nearly finished. The elevator began stopping where it shouldn't. Not on a numbered floor, not on any marked level, just in between. The doors would open to concrete, or to nothing at all. Once, they opened to a mirror, a full-length pane that showed no reflection, just smoke, and the faint outline of someone kneeling. Each time it happened at 3:13 a.m. Each time it lasted 60 seconds, and then the doors would close again, as if nothing had ever happened. The repeating pattern. Technicians ran diagnostics on the elevator system. Everything was normal, until they noticed the pattern. Each incident occurred exactly 49 hours apart. 7 cycles, 7 nights, 7 offerings. And now a new cycle had begun. But this time, the elevator didn't return to normal. It lingered between floors, not stuck, not broken, just waiting, as if it was listening. The screaming silence. One evening, a courier named Thon took the elevator to deliver documents to the 11th floor. The car passed 10, then 11, then stopped. Not at 12, not at 13. There was no number on the display, only a blank screen. The lights dimmed. A soft hum filled the cabin. He pressed the emergency button. Nothing. Then, as the seconds passed, something strange happened. The elevator became silent. Not quiet. Silent. Completely void of sound. No electric hum. No breathing. Even the pounding of his own heartbeat disappeared. It was the kind of silence that made the world feel like it had stopped turning. When the doors opened, Thon was gone. Only his phone remained, recording. The audio? 60 seconds of pure silence, and then a single chime, like a temple bell, struck once, then never again. The priest refuses. Chaiwat, desperate now, called in a renowned monk from Ayutthaya, Pra-Ajahn-Yat, known for exorcisms, temple cleansings, and ancient rites. He arrived quietly. No camera crews, no spectacle. He walked the building in silence, eyes closed, fingers tracing invisible symbols in the air. When he reached the elevator, he stopped. He would not step inside. He whispered, "This is not possession, it is continuation." They were not trapped, they were placed, and they have not finished chanting. To enter now is to interrupt. Chaiwat pleaded, but the monk only bowed and laid 3 things outside the shaft: a bowl of uncooked rice, a lotus blossom, and a sealed envelope. He instructed that it be opened only if the elevator reached silence again. Then he left. The whispering floor. Later that night, an intern named Hyena claimed to hear whispers from behind the elevator control panel. He swore someone was reciting prayers in an old dialect, not Thai, not Pali, something older, earthier, more desperate. He pressed his ear to the wall, and the wall breathed. It inhaled, and with the exhale, the lights above him flickered. In the surveillance footage, he appeared to vanish for 3 seconds. Literally vanish. No glitch, no lag, just gone. Then he reappeared, standing, eyes open, whispering. They're at the final stanza. He collapsed shortly after, his mouth filled with ash, his hands burned with prayer marks. Between 11 and 12, the elevator now always paused between floors, not for long, not for dramatic effect, just long enough for passengers to feel something, a shift in gravity, a pressure behind the eyes, a sense of being watched. Some described it as standing on sacred ground. Others said it felt like sinking into the earth. One man vomited blood the moment the car reached the lobby. And still, no one stopped riding it. Not everyone had a choice. The return of the mirror. One night at 3:13 a.m., the elevator opened between the 11th and 12th floor. The walls inside were no longer steel. They were mirrored, and the reflection showed 7 monks seated in a circle, eyes closed, palms raised, chanting in unison. And in the center, a girl in white humming. And the doors stayed open just long enough for a single voice to whisper out, "Do not break the silence, or we must begin again." The restoration team arrived at dawn. Corporate had finally approved the removal of the shrine, not for spiritual reasons, but for marketing. The plan was to preserve the altar as a cultural display in the new ground floor atrium. Aesthetic, clean, modern reverence packaged for visitors. They wore gloves, boot covers. They measured every object on the altar, cataloged the bowls, the statue, the ash. Then they lit the candles. There were 3, one in front of each bowl. They used clean butane lighters. The flames ignited instantly, but instead of warm orange, they burned blue. No flicker, no smoke, just tall, unwavering columns of cerulean fire. And the room grew cold. The silence that followed. The restoration supervisor, Sofan, checked the temperature on his watch. It had dropped from 27 degrees Celsius to 14 degrees Celsius in under 60 seconds. And then he began to speak in monotone. "Begin at the breath. Bind the tongue. Complete the 7th turn." His team stared. He didn't blink, didn't pause, just kept repeating the same line. His hands moved slowly toward the altar, not to lift anything, but to bow. When they tried to stop him, his skin cracked at the touch, not breaking open, but splitting, like dry clay under pressure. Sofan collapsed shortly after. He would never speak again. The others join in. One by one, the crew members fell silent. They didn't faint. They didn't scream. They just stopped responding. Each stood motionless, eyes glazed, mouths slightly open. They began to whisper in sync, a chant, low, measured, ancient. It was the same cadence the building had heard from the vents, the same pattern found on the old VHS tapes, the same rhythm that had been echoing since the wall was first broken. They were joining it. The Bodhisattva opens its eyes. The wooden statue on the altar had remained unchanged for decades. Eyes closed, palms folded. But now, under the blue fire, its lids cracked, just a sliver, enough to see the faintest glint of something reflective underneath. Not wood, not paint, but something wet. Someone swore they saw it blink. The lights in the room shattered, the candles flared, and every photo in the hallway printer queue, even unrelated office files, began printing out the same image. 7 monks kneeling in fire, and one girl standing in white, hands outstretched, eyes closed, smiling. The voice that wasn't human. An emergency responder, called by a frightened custodian, entered the chamber at 3:14 a.m. His body cam caught 60 seconds of footage before the screen went dark. In those 60 seconds, a voice spoke. "Do not lift us. Do not display us. We are not decor. We are the gate." When they found him, the responder had lost all hearing. No trauma, no rupture, just silence. He could no longer hear human speech, but when he passed a Buddhist temple on his way to the hospital, he began to cry uncontrollably. And when he asked what he heard, he wrote 3 words on a notepad. "They're still praying." The digital collapse. Back at headquarters, the building's digital systems began to fail. Emails sent at 3:13 a.m. auto-deleted. Hard drives wiped themselves clean. Security cameras rebooted to a single looping frame. The shrine, still lit, still burning blue, still untouched. But in the footage, The altar was surrounded by barefoot figures, all in white. The staff that would not burn. The corporation tried one last time to remove the altar. They sent a team with heat-proofed gloves, vacuum tools, and museum-grade containers. The moment one of them touched the bowl, his hand ignited. No flame, just light. Brilliant blue light that outlined his skin like a human candle. But his body didn't burn. There was no pain, only stillness. He stood there for 90 seconds glowing. And then the flame vanished. His clothes were untouched, his skin unmarked. But his eyes were solid white. He never spoke again, only hummed, the same melody as Noina. The room sealed itself. At precisely 3:13 a.m., the chamber door closed on its own, welded shut, not by heat, not by hands, but by pressure, as if the room had become sacred again, and no one dared to break it. Not anymore. Instead, they sealed it off, labeled it a hazard, built a false wall over the entrance, and above the plaster, someone, no one knows who, etched a single line in chalk. The chant is nearly complete. Do not knock.
The first bell was heard at 3:13 a.m. It rang once, clear, soft. Not electronic, not from any device in the building. It was the sound of a temple bell, struck by hand. The kind used to begin rituals, the kind that marked the end of life. It echoed through concrete, through vents, through floors that had no power. And everyone who heard it stopped what they were doing. Some wept, some knelt, most just listened, as if something ancient had just woken up. The second bell. It came the next night. Same time, same tone, slightly louder, closer. But this time, it wasn't just sound. When the bell rang, every digital clock in the building reset to 00:00. Monitors flickered, projectors glitched, phones rang once, just once, then fell silent. And every screen flashed the same phrase in white text on black. The gate is opening. The survivor speaks. The first person to break silence in days was Sofan, the restoration supervisor, who had been comatose since the blue flames. He sat up in the hospital at 3:13 a.m., eyes wide open. He took one breath and whispered, "I saw them complete the circle." When asked what he meant, he simply pressed his palms together and closed his eyes. He hasn't spoken since, but sometimes nurses hear him chanting in his sleep. Not words, just rhythm. Exactly 7 syllables per breath. The bells spread. By the end of the week, other tenants in the building, on unrelated floors, began to report hearing bells. Not 1, not 2, but 7 bells, in slow, measured tones. Each tone came from a different corner of the building, from behind sealed walls, from elevator shafts, from ventilation ducts. And once the 7th bell rang, everything went quiet. No power outage, no malfunction, just silence. A thick, living silence, like breath being held. Then the lights would return, and on the floor near the elevator, another offering. The photo that shouldn't exist. An intern printed a floor plan for an event, but instead of the blueprint,
The printer spat out a high-resolution photograph. It showed the interior of a temple chamber. Stone floor, red drapes, 7 monks kneeling in a circle. In the center, a young woman in white. And on the far wall, a mural painted in ash. It depicted a tall wooden door cracked open. Through it spilled light, but the light was blue. When Chaiwat saw it, he collapsed. He said the photo matched the hidden 13th floor, the one that shouldn't exist, but was now pressing upward. The elevator that didn't arrive. At 3:13 a.m., a guest consultant visiting from Singapore called the elevator on the 18th floor. It arrived. The doors opened. No car, just a shaft filled with smoke. He stepped back, terrified, and then slowly a monk in blackened robes rose into view, not standing, but kneeling on a platform of air. He was holding a bell in one hand and a string of ash-covered beads in the other. The doors closed. When they opened again, the elevator was empty, but the consultant was never seen again. Only his watch was found, still ticking, still set to 3:13. The architect returns. Chaiwat could no longer ignore the truth. He stopped answering calls, stopped drawing, stopped pretending it could be explained away. He returned to the elevator chamber, now sealed, cold, and silent. There, in the dust, he found something waiting for him. A blueprint, drawn by hand, old, faded, but clearly his own. Except this one showed the 13th floor in full detail. The prayer chamber, the hidden doors, the sealed shaft. But the final note at the bottom chilled him most. The chant ends when the bell rings 8 times. Never let it ring 8. And beneath that, if it does, one must stay behind. The 7th bell. The next night, the bell rang again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then it didn't stop. A pause, a long breath, and the sound of a rope tightening around a suspended bell, as if someone were preparing to strike it again. But no sound came. Just the humming of the elevator, now vibrating gently between the 12th and 13th floors, like it was waiting for someone to enter, or someone to take their place.
The building knew silence again. But it was not peace. It was the kind of silence that came just before thunder, the kind before a vow is broken, or before a door is opened that was never meant to be found. And in that silence, someone began asking the only question that mattered. Who stayed behind? The paper that surfaced. An old folder appeared one morning on the 12th floor reception desk. No one saw who placed it there. Security cameras had glitched during the night. Inside were blueprints, photographs, notes written in fading ink. At the bottom of the pile, paper-clipped to a page titled Sealing Ceremony 1973, was a name. Pra Virot, the youngest of the monks, a disciple, barely 25 when the building began construction. He had volunteered to stay, not just to chant,
but to carry the weight of silence should the others falter. His role was not to guard, it was to complete. The chant was only as strong as its final voice, and that voice had to remain within the concrete. The unburied vow. Chaiwat brought the folder to a retired archivist who'd once cataloged Buddhist temple evacuations during city development. She confirmed the name. Pravirot disappeared shortly after the land was sold, but not in death records, not in monastic rolls. His name was erased. That only happens when someone chooses to remove themselves. When asked what that meant, she whispered, "It means he became part of the shrine." The return of the palm print. That night, a janitor found a black handprint pressed against the inside of the 13th floor elevator mirror. Not a full palm, just fingers, as if someone was sliding downward, held by gravity and silence. And scrawled below it, "I never stopped chanting." The Bodhisattva's second gaze. The wooden statue on the hidden shrine began to change again. The crack where its eyelids once split was now wide enough to reveal both eyes, hollow and black, like tunnels cut into charcoal. But its posture had shifted, slightly, subtly. The hands once pressed together in prayer were now parting, not in welcome, but in surrender. And beneath it, resting on the altar, was a worn monk's robe, still folded, still soaked with age, and still warm to the touch. The label inside read, "V. Shantorot, Novice Class 3. The elevator that descended by itself. At exactly 3:13 a.m., the central elevator, long powered down, lit up on every floor. No one pressed a button. No one was inside. It began descending slowly, floor by floor. When it reached B2, the lights cut. But in the silence, building microphones picked up breathing, rhythmic, calm, and a chant, barely audible. "Do not open the door. I am still here." The mirror between worlds. The maintenance team opened the mirror panel in the B2 elevator car the next morning, hoping to inspect the system. Behind the mirror, they found bricks, old bricks, hand-packed, etched with prayer lines. Each brick had been signed in blood. Each signature began with the same character, V. And deep in the wall, embedded in concrete, they saw the outline of a seated body, curled into meditation, sealed behind stone, still intact, still watching. The truth they buried. Pravirot had never left. He had sat in silence for 50 years, whispering a chant no one could hear, except the building, except the elevator, except those who came too close to the space between floors. The bells were his voice, the ash was his breath, the silence between 12 and 13 was his heartbeat. He had carried the others. He had sealed the ritual. He had absorbed the weight of unfinished prayers. And now he was tired. The whisper that shook the lights. That night, every bulb in the building dimmed for 30 seconds. No alarm, no system fault. Only a single phrase whispered into the building's emergency PA system. "I cannot hold it much longer," followed by the faint sound of a bell, preparing to ring an 8th time. The elevator began to vanish. Not break down, not stall. It would be called. It would register on the panel. It would begin its ascent. And then it would simply disappear. Not on every attempt, just at 3:13 a.m., and only for those who were alone. The disappearances begin. A night manager on the 9th floor, a courier on the 16th, a cleaner collecting trash from the 11th. Each one entered the elevator. Each one was recorded stepping inside. Each one waved, yawned, or scrolled through their phone. And then, at the point where the elevator should have reached the next floor, the signal cut. The car no longer existed on the system. The sensors stopped tracking, and the interior cameras showed nothing. No one screaming, no violence, just an empty shaft breathing smoke. By morning, they were gone. No bodies, no blood, just white thread left neatly on the floor of the lobby, tied in 7 loops, knotted in prayer. The emergency call button. A maintenance worker was tasked with testing the emergency buttons in each car. He reported one anomaly on elevator car 4. The button worked, but instead of the usual automated dispatch tone, it connected to an open line. Not static, not silence, but a voice. A monk's voice, breathing slowly, chanting a single verse. Not all who ride shall return. Some must arrive. Some must remain. Then, click, the call ended. And when they reviewed the car's microphone logs, that section had been overwritten by a humming sound, identical to Noina's melody. The mirror that refused to reflect. On the 12th floor, the mirror inside the elevator began to glitch. First, it blurred. Then, it stopped showing reflections entirely. Instead, it revealed a room. Stone floors, 7 kneeling monks, 1 standing girl, all lit by blue fire. And at the far end of the reflection, a wooden door taller than any man, pulsing slightly with light. The building's reflection team tried to replace the glass, but behind it they found no wall, only concrete scraped raw, and a mark carved into the surface that read, "This is not a mirror, it is a memory." The engineer who spoke in ash. A systems engineer named Chamwit volunteered to reboot the elevator software from within the shaft access terminal. He descended with full safety equipment, radio, laptop, sensors. At 3:13 a.m., the team monitoring him heard his voice on the open channel. But it wasn't his voice anymore. It was low, echoing, ancient. He began chanting, then coughing. The coughing grew violent. Each breath expelled ash. It began coating the inside of the shaft camera until the lens went black. By the time they reached him, his uniform was there, still warm, still zipped, but empty. And inside the terminal panel, someone had drawn a door using soot and fingertip. 7 loops around it, each loop a chanting mouth. The shaft that breathes. The elevator shaft itself began to make sounds, not creaks, not cables, but breathing. Soft, deep, rhythmic, as if a sleeping body were pressed deep inside the walls, and now, slowly, it was waking up. A security guard placed his palm against the metal casing and immediately fainted. He later told paramedics that he had felt a heart beating, not in the building, beneath it. The door that opens for no one. One night, the elevator arrived for Chaiwat. He hadn't pressed the button. He hadn't moved. He had only stood before the shrine, watching the blue flame flicker. And still, the elevator arrived, opened, waited. He stepped in. No floor was selected. No lights turned on. But the car moved. Down, down, beyond the basement, beyond the mechanical sublevel, beyond anything mapped. And then it stopped. The doors didn't open, but a sound whispered through the air duct above. You cannot build over silence. You can only join it. The car returned him to the lobby at 3:16 a.m. He was covered in ash. His palms had white thread tied around them, and beneath his shoes were footprints that didn't match his own. Bare, narrow, and facing the opposite direction, as if someone had stood behind him the entire ride. The elevator that never arrives. The next day, elevator car 4 was permanently disconnected from the system. It still moved, still opened its doors, still hummed softly between floors. But no one could call it, and no one could stop it. It simply arrived when it wanted to. The building began to empty. Workers left. Tenants broke leases. Deliveries stopped. But still, at 3:13 a.m., every night, the elevator continued its route. And every few nights, it opened for someone. They would step inside. The doors would close. And the elevator would never arrive again. In the end, the building stood quiet. No lights flickering, no smoke curling from vents, no offerings appearing in bowls that no longer existed. Just stillness. Even the hum of the elevator shaft, a sound that had pulsed through steel and breath for weeks, was gone. It was 3:13 a.m., and for the first time, there was nothing. The shrine behind the wall. They sealed it again, not because of fear, not to erase it, but out of something that felt like respect. The altar was never moved, the statue never touched again. The blue flames had extinguished themselves, slowly, gently, after the 7th bell. And when Chaiwat placed his hand on the wall one last time, he felt only warmth. Not heat, warmth. Like skin, like a blessing. One final visitor. In the quiet that followed, a girl arrived. She wore white, carried nothing, said no name, signed nothing. She stood before the elevator at 3:12 a.m., humming softly, an old melody that no one remembered how to sing, but everyone recognized. The elevator arrived. It opened. Inside was a monk, young, barefoot, eyes closed, hands folded. He didn't speak, only nodded, and she stepped in. The doors closed. The panel didn't light up. The building exhaled, and the car never returned. What the cameras showed. The final footage, pulled weeks later from the last working security system, showed the elevator doors open and no one inside. But across the floor, burned into the dust, was a circle, 7 loops, 7 petals, and in the center, a thread tied once, then left behind, like a promise or a replacement. What the architects did. The development project was abandoned quietly. No announcement, no press, just quiet delays, then cancellations, then silence. Investors said it was due to structural uncertainty. But Chaiwat knew better. He had stopped drawing, he had stopped signing. He simply walked the building once more, one final time, hand trailing the walls like prayer beads. And on the 12th floor, behind the sealed panel, he left a small slip of paper. It read, "Thank you for holding the chant. It is finished now. Rest." What the city heard. Some say the building still hums. Not every night, just sometimes. On clear nights, when no one is listening for it, when the city itself forgets. The elevator lights still flicker, not from faults, but from memory. And every once in a while, a night watchman will pause, turn, listen, and hear, very faintly, somewhere beneath his feet, a single chime. The time that never changed. No matter how many times the control systems are updated, no matter how many servers are replaced, one thing never resets. 3:13 a.m. The clocks always return to it. The elevators always pause at it. The air always stills, as if the building remembers, as if it honors what happened, and as if it is still waiting. Not haunted, just holding space. The last footprint. In a forgotten corner behind the elevator shaft, sealed now, painted over, unnoticed, one mark remains. A bare footprint in dried resin, small, delicate, and next to it, carved into concrete, "I stayed, so the others could go." And now the building no longer chants. The bells no longer ring. The shrine no longer asks, because someone remained behind. Someone took the silence and made it sacred.